thanks to the Ashar Board of Education chaired by Dr. Becky Bennis for helping us and inspiring us towards this evening's event. The format of the program is very, very simple. We will have two fantastic speakers, followed by a panel question and answers with both pre-submitted questions as well as questions pertaining to the topics at hand. It's interesting that the first mitzvah in the Chumash given to individuals is, of course, as we read this morning, Karban Pesach. And not coincidentally, the mitzvah is presented as Selaves Avos, Selabayis. That's the mitzvah is one that begins with the home. The very first mitzvah is a paradigm of all future mitzvahs. And as much as we very much value our education, we are proud to partner with our parents. But at the end of the day, much of what our children will and have become is a product of the home. Selaves Avos, Selabayis. One continues with the various mitzvahs d'Rabbanan, with the mitzvah of Purim. It's not a coincidence. Vayam ha'elam nizkarim v'nasim mishpacha mishpacha. It begins in the home, family, family. The Nes, the commemoration of Hanukkah, is Ner Ish Uveiso. Again, the commemoration is based in the home, begins in the home, and is founded in the home. It's thus our distinct privilege to partner with our parent body, with parents in the community, and to hopefully come up with insights, advice, and to share a little bit from renowned experts as to how to positively parent and ensure that our children are productive, are happy, and are poised for a bright and successful future. Our first speaker is Rabbi Donnie Staum, Rav of Kilat New Hampstead, Rabbi at Ashar, as well as a social worker guidance counselor both Ashar and Beis HaChinuch. Rabbi Staum is known to many of us through his Staum Torah, his following Omosh. The Staum faithful are avid readers of Rabbi Staum's insights, and it's truly a privilege to hear from Rabbi Staum on the topic of raising respectful children in a chutzpah tolerant society. Rav Daniel Staum.
Good luck, Shavua Tov. Being that I have no doubt that all of you who came out here tonight have no problems of chutzpah or respect in your homes, I really appreciate that you just came to hear me speak this evening. Very kind of you. Just in opening, a thought also, as Rabbi Jacobson just did, based on the Parsha. What would you think Klal Yisrael is standing on the precipice of leaving Egypt? What would you think would be the message that Moshe Rabbeinu would give over? What would he be speaking about? Like President Lincoln, Gettysburg Address, a new nation conceived in liberty, a new birth of freedom. Nelson Mandela called the long walk to freedom. Moshe Rabbeinu speaks about one theme over and over again. Children, education, and the future. The distant future. Because as a nation, that is our primary goal. That's one of our primary missions, is to educate our children, to give over to the next world. Just to quote a few lines, just briefly, from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of England, he said, Jews are the only history who based their survival on the education of their children. The Egyptians built pyramids, the Greeks built the Parthenon, the Romans built the Colosseum, and the Jews built schools. And one more quote. There is only one way to change the world, and that is by education. You have to teach children the importance of justice, righteousness, kindness, and compassion. You have to teach them that freedom can be sustained only by the laws and habits of self-restraint. To be respectful, productive, successful people, I think that's what we all want from our children, or for our children. which is probably why on a cold Motzei Shabbos we all came out this evening. I remember once, a number of years ago, it was a Sunday morning, it was before a shir, and one of the congregants said to the rabbi in the shul, he said, you know what the problem is? We need to have more kibbut avayim programs in our schools. That's the problem. The Rav laughed. He said, there's plenty of programs in our yeshivas, in our schools. He says, I want to tell you two things. Number one, how do we respect the other parent? How do we respect our spouse? Anybody who just looked at their spouse, I saw you. The other question is, if we're blessed that we still have our parents, how do we speak to our parents or about our parents? Kid walks by and hears mother or father on the phone. So I said, Ma, take it easy. It makes an impression. Our children hear that. They pick that up. Someone once asked of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the great halachic authority from Eretz Yisrael, someone asked him, how come the Shulchan Aruch says that there's a law that a child must stand up for their parents? How come today children don't stand up for their parents? His response was, they don't. Someone told me of a situation recently. Present you the situation, and at the end, hopefully, I'll get back to what the parent did about it. There was a substitute in the class. This is a second grade girl, I believe. And this child was so disrespectful. She wasn't the only one, but the substitute called the mother, and she said, or met the mother as the mother was leaving, and said, your daughter was so disrespectful. I don't want to come back next week. The mother was horrified. What should she do? And I leave that for the end. I'll get back to what the parent did. And I think in discussing, I'm going to talk a little bit about the reactive, and how we react when children are disrespectful. I'm sure that the word that is etched in people's mind is the word chutzpah. It was somewhere in that title, and that might have been the only thing that people saw. But Dr. Nissel will afterwards speak about the proactive, which is in some ways more important, about building relationships and communication. Why are children disrespectful? There was a boy who went to an interview, Nashar, and the principal asked him, knowing that this kid had an anger problem, he said, what do you do when you get angry? So the kid said, he was a young boy, he said, I use chutzpah. As if it was a tool. Some kids use biting, tantruming, kvetching. Why do kids use these tools? Why does the kid use chutzpah? And the answer is, because it works. Because it works for them to get what they want. And the question then is, what is it that they want? Because our goal is going to be to make sure that it doesn't work for them. Whatever they're trying to achieve, we don't want it to work because we want them to use better means. Someone, a number of years ago, Rabbi Steinman, from Bnei Brak, one of the greatest Torah authorities today, someone asked him, when he was here in Monsey, what do we do with chutzpahdik children? His response was shocking. He said, chutzpah, nish da azazach. There's no such thing. What he meant to say is, everyone's in the crowd is sitting there like, there is, What he meant to say is, chutzpah in itself, there's no such thing. There's something behind it. There's something motivating it. It's only a symptom. And if you want to deal with chutzpah, you need to deal with the real problem, not with the symptom. What are the benefits? Number one, we're very busy. We're all very busy. Someone once said, if you want to get time from the busiest person in the world, you want a half hour of the busiest person in the world's time, sit down and talk to him about his kids, about how wonderful they are. But how busy he or she is, they'll have time. When our children want to get our attention, when they're chutzpahdik to us, see, at 3 o'clock in the morning when we're asleep, our children sneak out of our homes. They take a course called How to Push Your Parents' Buttons. They all ace it. Our children don't have to take that course. It's natural. They live in our homes. They see us. They are miniature microphones of us. They are microcosms of us. If you want to know what you sound like, listen carefully when your kids play house. Listen carefully to how your children talk. It's frightening. And I say that as a parent. But if they want to get their parents' undivided attention, they know how to push their buttons to say what they want, especially a spirited child who needs that rise. Not only are they going to get their parents' undivided attention, it's going to be emotional, it's going to be passionate, it's going to be with a lot of force. There's an analogy that I love that I always use it with kids, but it's true for us as well. I ask boys or girls, I ask students, children, who sometimes have a problem with teasing. They get teased, and their reactions are terrible. Because I have a child like this at home, thank God. Well, other children rates him on, and he blows a hissy fit, and they love it. And you try to explain to the child what they're doing wrong, because the more you do it, the more they're going to do it. Because you're giving them the reaction they want. So the analogy I use is, you like remote controls. I heard someone say recently, he says, you don't need to talk about children that way. You ever see an adult who's looking for the remote control? So a guy will miss half the football game if he can't find the remote control. You know? So everybody likes the remote control because it's very empowering that I can sit here and I can turn something on from there. Turn on a helicopter, I can turn on the toy thing, I can turn on TV, I can turn on an entertainment system. Very empowering. I tell a kid, when you react so strongly, you are giving the other children a remote control that says, all I have to do is say this line or make a comment about this, and they will blow. And it will be a great show. Our children have a remote control for getting a rise out of us. And one of those tools is chutzpah. And for a child, their parents and all their adults, their teachers also, are huge. They're larger than life. The powerful adults who can do what they want, and children are so, controlled. To be able to control an adult, to manipulate an adult, to get an adult upset, it's very exciting. It was a boy who used to ask his Rabbi very pointed, very biting hashkafa questions about God, about religion, about Torah. It was fourth grade class. Young boy would ask these very sophisticated questions. And the Rebbe would scramble, not expecting in a fourth grade class these types of questions, would scramble to try to give an answer not only for the kid, but also in front of the whole class. He said it took him a few weeks until he realized this was an ADT type kid. He said this kid had no interest in the answer. When the Rebbe would answer, even when he got the answer right on, it was a perfect answer, so the kid would tune out. He was totally spaced out. He said he wasn't interested in the answer. He wanted the rise. When you ask a question like that and you know you're going to get that rise, that's what he wanted. Once the Rebbe understood that, his responses were different. He wouldn't allow him to ask those questions in class. We all know the importance of allowing children to ask questions, but what's motivating them? If they really don't care and they just want the rise, don't give it to them. The second thing that chutzpah accomplishes is that children, or a person who's using chutzpah, wants to take the attention away from the core issue. Once heard a great line. It's always more exciting to debate the competency of a teacher than it is to sit through a lesson that's making you feel dumb. I'm sitting in a math class. I always use math because that was my struggle. Baruch Hashem, I don't think I was very chutz with it, but I always tell my students, I said, what do you do if you, students sometimes think that school is life. I'm trying to tell them that even if you struggle in school, the help of Hashem, you'll have a different life. You'll build yourself your own life. So I always tell them, what do you do if you struggle in math? Your whole life you're struggling in math. You marry a woman who's good at math and you become a school guidance counselor. But a child who's sitting in a class and they're feeling very dumb. When a child says they're bored, it's a code word. It almost always means something else. Once in a while a child could be bored. But usually you say this is boring. Child screams out in the middle of class, boring. Child doesn't mean boring. Child means I feel stupid. I'm sitting in here and I don't get it. So it's much more entertaining if I'll say to the teacher, my father makes a lot more money than you and he doesn't have to know this stuff. This is stupid. You don't even know what you're talking about. The worst teacher ever. And it's insulting because the teacher who puts so much work and so much effort into their lesson, it's hard to hear. The child is supposed to be cleaning their room. You're the meanest parent ever. My friends don't have to do this. You hate me. And it hurts. So we launch into a discussion of, what do you mean? Last week we did this, and tomorrow we're doing this, and this. And meanwhile, the kid didn't clean his room. Didn't do what he had to do. And this goes into a concept which I call the secret code of language. Which is that, I guess literally you could say, I don't mean what I say. Kids, and I give kids examples. I don't mean it in a bad way, I don't mean what I say. I mean that the nonverbal communication, our body language is much stronger than our verbal communication. A kid who says, I give this example to students and they always get it. A kid who says, I don't care. I don't even care. I don't care at all. Do they not care? And all the kids smile and they say, of course they care. Because if they really didn't care, they would say, I don't care, and they would walk away. But the fact that they're standing there moping around and saying, I don't care, means that they really do care. But I'm embarrassed to show that I care. A parent walks into a principal. I'm sure this has never happened here. But a parent walks into a principal and says, I'm not the only one upset about my kid's teacher. What often the real message is, what the parent really is thinking is, I'm afraid for my child. But I don't want to admit that I'm afraid for my child. It's much easier to say, I'm not the only parent who's angry. There's a lot of other parents who are angry. Because we don't want to show fear. So we show anger instead, because it's easier. I'll tell you a recent something happened. There were two boys who were in art class, and they wanted to join another boy. And the other boy didn't want such a big group. He said no. So they said to him, they started making, let's say his name was David. They said, David, your art stinks, your art's stupid. So he got all upset, he took it, he threw it in the garbage. The next day I had two boys, David and one of the instigators. I was talking to them in my office. And I said to the instigator, I said, was his art stupid? He says, no, it was pretty good. I said, is that why you were upset that he didn't let you into your group? Is that why you were making fun of him? He said, yeah. I said to the other boy, did you hear that? Did you hear what he just said? Because he missed it. He was like already on to the next thing. I said, wait, you need to hear that. That's very important. They said it's stupid. What they really meant is, we want to be part of it. And since we're not part of it, we're going to say a nasty comment about it. And it's important that we need to hear the unsaid message. It's true in children dealing with each other, and it's also true as parents, with chutzpah. But before discussing how we should react to chutzpah, I want to just mention that and this is very important, that we have to realize that it's not always chutzpah. I'll tell you a story with adults. And there's at least one person in this room who was present when this story happened. Somebody, I think he's an Ashar alumnus, made a bris. And he has connections through his business with sports teams. And so there were two players from the Jets who were there, football, NFL, Jets, who were in the back of the room. I think every kid there knew that they were coming. And these players are standing in the back signing autographs. And a collector from Eretz Yisrael, a fellow, was there also, collecting some money. And he sees all these kids, everybody's crowding around the back where these two football players are. So he takes his pet deck, his signed paper from the rabbi that he was going, and he hands it to the player, this big tall player, who smiles, autographs it, and hands it back to him. I'm sure the collector thought that was terrible chutzpah. There's a classic story that's set over in the halls of education about a Rabbi who walked in late one morning. His car broke down, everything went wrong that was possible. He walked in 15 minutes late to class. He walks in and there's a kid, a little bit of a spirited kid, who goes like this when the Rebbe walks in. And the Rebbe is seething after, at that moment. But he holds himself back and he says nothing. A few minutes, and he says nothing the whole class. Holds himself back, very impressive. By recess, before he calls the boy over to discuss with him, the kid comes running up to his desk. Rebbe, did you see my new watch my parents gave me last night? You can imagine what would have happened if the Rebbe would have let him have it for chutzpah. The kid wouldn't know what hit him. And I've seen this happen, not with the watch. I saw one time a principal talking, and, not Nashar, and it wasn't even such a horrible story, but the kid said something, and the Manal took it to be very, very disrespectful, and it did sound disrespectful. He said, would you do that? I forgot what the context was. And he said, yes. The real answer was no. And the Manal said, that's why we have a problem here. And I went over to Manal when there was a lull, and I said, he meant it seriously. Manal was a good man, and he said to him, he said, did you mean that seriously? The kid said, yes. And he apologized, and Manal apologized in front of everyone, which was very impressive. But it's so easy to make those mistakes. So just throwing that out there, different school that I work in, there was one boy who was, I walked in once and he says, Rabbi Staum, I think you shaved a little too low. Which I knew I did. It's the same kid who told me that when I came back from Florida, what'd you do? You stuck your face in an oven or something? But a child can be nervous and uncomfortable. You need to just be weary of that fact that sometimes children don't need to be disrespectful. So how should we react to chutzpah? So here's an article that I have from July of 2010. Elderly woman breaks student's nose for failing to give up bus seat. That's one approach. Wouldn't advise it today. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But if a child wants that attention and wants that rise, then our mission is not to give it to them. So the parent responds, I'll be happy to talk to you when your voice is as calm as mine. And there's a broken record player technique to keep saying it. I'll be happy to talk to you when your voice is as calm as mine. Of course, if you're saying it in a little bit of an emotional fashion, it's not going to work. I'll be happy to talk to you when your voice is as calm as mine. Not going to work very well. I hear that you're very angry right now, but we're not allowed to talk that way. So we launch into lectures and speeches. There's a classic cartoon. It's for better or for worse, I think. And it's a mother with a teenage kid with the headphones on, everything, sitting on his messy bed. And the mother's in this is the cover of the book. The mother is in lecture mode. And the caption is, the kid saying to the mother, if this is a lecture, just tell me how long it's going to be. I don't think that ended well. But when we're in a heated moment, there is no education going on anyway. Our goal is to diffuse the moment. Get out of the situation. You're anyways not going to educate the child. There's a pasuk in Mishlei that everybody quotes. Chanoch lenar al pi darko. Educate a child according to his way or her way. Beautiful, excellent, integral. But the end of the pasuk often gets lost. Gam ki yazkin lo yoser mimenu. Even when he or she will become old, they will not deviate from it. The goal of education is that we're talking to the child's soul, and we want to make an impression. Anytime there's a heated moment, you are not educating your child. Your child is not going to inculcate lessons. And if you're angry at them, then they're going to be focusing on your anger and the punishment that you give them. Diffuse the situation. Deal with it later. Go back. You have to deal with it later. Go back to the situation and say, remember when you spoke to me that way before? It's not acceptable. And there could be a consequence. But when your voice is calm and you say to the child, I'm sorry you spoke to me that way, that's not acceptable. And, whatever consequence you come up with. But at the time, you can say to the child, you can't speak to me that way. Even if you're angry, I'll be happy to talk to you when your voice is as calm as mine. And that's our goal, to diffuse the situation. Why does chutzpah upset us so much? Because we take it so personally, as I mentioned before. Kafui tov, he doesn't appreciate all the things I do. And a child says to us, this is a great technique, a child says to us, my friends don't have to do this. You could say, just repeat it, broken record player. Or you could say, nice try. None of my friends have to do this. You hate me. Nice try. The kid will become a little befuddled. But our reaction to anything is how we perceive it. And we often blame ourselves, if my parenting was different, if my parenting was better, then this wouldn't have happened. And all of us, with the exception of me, all of us have problems with disrespect in our homes. And it's not necessarily a product. We all do our best. But if we blame ourselves, we're not going to get anywhere. I want to tell you, if we can see past the chutzpah and not address the chutzpah as it is and see past it, I want to tell you one of my favorite stories. I have a Rabbi, Mati Finkelman, who's an excellent educator, a tremendous educator, besides being a great scholar, Talmid Chacham. He was in camp for many years. I was with him in camp in the Rebuilding. And there was one boy, called him Yishai, and Yishai was a good ball player, and he did not like coming into daven, especially to mincha at the end of the day. They would, sweep him off the courts, get up to mincha. He did not like coming up. And one of the rules, they didn't have, too many rules, but, the dress code, you had to wear socks for davening, at least socks. Can't come into shul without socks. And this boy, Yishai, every day, Yishai, please go get socks. Yishai, please go get socks. One day he came in, his face was flushed. They just kicked him off the court. He comes in, and there's about 100-something kids in there, the older divisions of came. And Rabbi Finkelman says, Yishai, please go get socks. And b'fnei kol am ve'edim, in front of everyone, Rabbi Finkelman, I hate you. I'm going to freeze that moment and ask you what you would do at that moment. Without batting an eyelash, he said, and I love you, and you need to get socks. Because he didn't fall into the chutzpah. He knew, he understood. The message was, he doesn't really hate him. He didn't want to put on socks. But if he would have got into a whole struggle, power struggle about, you need, and that, it's disrespectful, and he wouldn't have taught him anything anyway. Now it's hard to do. Granted, it's hard to do. But if you keep the perspective and realize what's really behind it, it's not as hard. Because you realize that it's a technique, it's a tool. And sometimes it's better, it's always better not to address things at the time that they happen. Let me wrap this up. Just a few more brief points. Why does chutzpah happen? This is important perspective as well. A friend of mine told me that his sister is a menaheles, she's a principal. And someone asked her, what is the biggest problem in education today? And she said the problem is that parents want to be their children's best friend. And they're afraid to parent. So afraid that I'm going to send my kid off the derech, I'm going to send my kid into rebellion. And the truth is, I once heard a lecture, it was titled, How to Be Your Child's Best Friend. And the lecturer began and said, the answer is you don't. If you want to be a good parent, you need to be a parent. Children want that security. They want us to be parents. They feel safe when they have parents, when they have limits. Children who feel out of control, act out of control. And it's scary for a child when they feel out of control. And children who become spoiled and pampered, they resent their parents later on because they're not able to be independent. There's also a culture of chutzpah. We accept it. Not purposely, but what can you do? It's the way it is. Kids these days. The Gemara in Sota says, in the door of Mashiach, in the generation of Mashiach, which we're definitely either at or around there, chutzpah yaski. There's going to be a proliferation of chutzpah. Someone once said, it's not a law, chutzpah yaski. It's just the way it is. We don't have to accept it. A mother is in the supermarket, and she's with her children, and a person is standing and listening to it, and every aisle, Ma, can you get this? Ma, can you get this? Please, we want this. And every aisle, she says, no, we can't get it. You're allergic to this. Even when she says you're allergic, no, but I want it and it's fine. Every aisle. They get to one aisle, and he notices there's no discussion. The kids are quiet. And he can't hold himself back. He's up to the mother. He says, what happened? Every other aisle is screaming and yelling, begging, and here they're quiet? So she says, oh, I told him it's not kosher. Everything else they knew was up for discussion. Even allergies, they could fight her maybe. But they knew when she said it's not kosher, there is nothing to talk about. And no amount of whining is going to change this. They knew that. If our attitude is more stronger, now again, depending on the age and without getting into a parish struggle, we can't accept chutzpah. Yaakov Kamenetsky said that there's no place for chutzpah in a yeshiva, even in English, especially in English, even secular. There's no place. You can't have such things going on in a place where you're educating children. There's no place for such a thing. There was when I was in Shari Torah, it was my alma mater, in high school, was a Rabbi there, the Manal for many years, was Rabbi David Katzenstein. And he used to train us the first day. And this was also an alumnus. He trained us the first day that when you speak to a Rebbe, you have to speak to a Rebbe in third person. He said, I don't need the cover. I don't need the cover from you. But this is the way it is when you speak to Rebbe that way. And everybody in Shari Torah, they always spoke to the Rebbe in third person. He had one boy in the yeshiva who was a relative of his. And quite a spirited young man. And I'll never forget, one time I was in the hallway and they were arguing about something. And he said, this kid said to his, it was a cousin or whatever, he said, Rebbe is such an idiot. Third person. The last thing that goes through our minds before we lose it, and it's not, oh yeah, I gotta get milk tonight. the last thing that goes through our minds is, I have no control. Before a teacher loses it, before a parent loses it, I have no control of this situation. I have no control over my child, I have no control, my kids, I have no control over my house. We have to remind ourselves we do. We do. Maybe I'm stressed, maybe I'm tense. I do. And my child's disrespect is not in reflection on me. And this is not what hopefully they'll grow up to be, because I'm working on it. And this one isolated incident doesn't mean that my child is a mess and what's going to be. This girl who came home, just to conclude, about this point, about not accepting it. She came home, and her parents sat her down. First she had to go to her room. There was no discussion. Her mother was so embarrassed and so upset. It was one of those when your father comes home. But when they came home, they sat down with her and they discussed it with her, and they said to her, not acceptable. You can't act that way. For your sake, you can't act that way. And they told her she has to go to her room, she has to write an apology. Can't come back. She was a young girl. Again, every age is different, has to be dealt with differently. Write an apology. The parents called the substitute. She didn't live too far away. Brought her over to the substitute's house and handed the apology letter to her late that night. This parent told me what happened. The substitute gave her a kiss and told her that's so special. But the parent sent a message to the child, that is not acceptable. It's not like, okay, chutzpah, this is what happens. But we all put so much into our children, and we love our children so much, and we have so many hopes for our children. And it's painful, and it's difficult. But to remind ourselves that it's a long-term investment, not a short-term investment. And Hashem should bless all of our efforts. And we should reap all the fruits of our efforts and enjoy the nachas from our children. Thank you very much for listening.